You let yourself settle into the slow breath of night, and as your awareness softens, the world around you narrows to a gentle path illuminated by the faint glow of ancient firelight. You're drifting toward a place where stone huts cluster beside a shallow river, where smoke rises from hearths tended by hands long vanished, yet still warm in memory. This is early Rome, not the marble-clad empire you might picture, but a rugged settlement perched on its hills, textured with brambles and hope, shaped more by cattle herders than by senators. Before laws, before legions, before the clatter of minted coins, Rome's economy is a murmur of barter, trust, and the awkward promise of early exchange. You step into a small clearing where two farmers negotiate quietly. One offers grain measured in rough sacks, another gestures toward a sturdy goat tethered nearby. Their trade is slow, personal, reliant on nods and familiarity, because value here is not written or stamped. Value breathes in the usefulness of objects. You can almost feel the shift in the air as you sense how inconvenient such exchanges must have been. What if one family needed metal tools rather than livestock? What if someone offered wool when the other craved salt? To smooth out these frictions, early Romans relied on shapes of bronze, simple, heavy, unrefined. These were aes rude, raw bronze lumps, irregular pieces that clink dully in the hand. They hold worth not through artistry but through weight. Nothing about them resembles the coins we know, they are merely tokens of possibility. You imagine a Roman craftsman, soot smeared along his cheek, breaking a larger bronze ingot into smaller pieces, weighing them on a primitive balance. He doesn't engrave them, doesn't sculpt them, just ensures they contain enough metal to satisfy local custom. When someone hides these lumps in a cloth pouch, you hear the clatter of uneven metal. That sound is the trembling heartbeat of an economy seeking stability. And even this rudimentary step marks a bold transformation, because suddenly trade does not hinge solely on personal trust. Bronze begins to speak a language of its own, one rooted in weight and availability. As you drift deeper, twilight thickens, settling softly over the Palatine Hill. Shepherds are gathering their herds, and you notice something curious. The cattle themselves are part of Rome's earliest unit of value. Centuries later, stories will echo across the empire that a person's wealth once lay not in gold but in living animals, creatures whose hides warmed families and whose strength ploughed the soil. The Latin word for money, pecunia, will arise from picus, meaning cattle, a linguistic reminder that Rome's earliest wealth trotted on four legs. The idea feels strangely organic, as though the landscape itself determined the earliest currency, measured not in coins but in breath, muscle, and the quiet rhythm of hooves. You walk with a merchant who leads you toward a riverside workshop where newly made bronze pieces cool in the night air. He explains, in a voice softened by the years, that bronze is reliable. It does not spoil like grain or sicken like livestock. It can be shaped when needed and stored without fear. But even as you listen, something shifts in your peripheral senses, as though the society forming around these lumps is restless, preparing for another step toward complexity. Bronze lumps are useful, yes, but they require constant weighing, endless verification. A dishonest trader might file away a sliver when no one is looking. A lazy merchant might guess the weight rather than measure it. And you feel that in a growing community, one dreaming of expansion, precision will soon matter. A faint breeze brushes your cheek as you drift forward in time. Rome's people grow more numerous, their ambitions broader. Their trade stretches beyond the humble hills into neighbouring towns and tribes. As you watch wagons rattle along dirt roads, you see how the limitations of aes rude become clearer. You picture a soldier, his pay delayed because bronze lumps must be weighed again and again. You picture a market stall where the vendor frowns, unsure whether the metal piece offered truly matches the stated weight. All these moments swirl together into a collective sigh, a desire for something more consistent, something that carries meaning beyond mere metal content. The scene around you softens and the workshops grow larger, busier. Bronze is now cast in more deliberate shapes, though still unmarked, still plain. These transitional forms prepare Rome for a leap still ahead, the moment when the city will stamp its identity onto its money. But for now, your attention lingers on the quiet ingenuity of these early steps. Rome is building trust one weighty clump at a time, establishing an economic foundation whose echoes will one day reach the furthest edges of the known world. Close your eyes a little deeper, and the earth itself seems to warm beneath your feet. You feel the hum of a community discovering that currency is not merely material, it is psychological. People begin to rely on the certainty that bronze offers, knowing they can trade across greater distances with fewer misunderstandings. And though historians still argue whether these earliest forms functioned more as proto-money or as standardized raw material for casting tools, the effect on daily life is undeniable. Slowly, gently, Rome is learning to measure value not only by the usefulness of objects but by abstract agreement. In that abstraction lies the seed of future empires. The sky overhead begins to shimmer with the faintest promise of dawn, yet the world remains suspended, caught in a kind of dreamy equilibrium between barter and currency. You feel yourself drift through the smoke-filled interior of a chieftain's hall where elders discuss tribute. Bronze lumps pile before them like dormant embers. Each piece represents not just wealth but obligation, gifts owed, favours expected, debts remembered. You sense how early money intertwines with social ties, shaping relationships even before formal laws exist. A father might give bronze lumps as part of his daughter's dowry. A warrior might receive them after proving himself in battle. Their roles are flexible, reflecting the shifting needs of a community learning to codify its values. You wander now to the outskirts, where artisans work near primitive forges. Sparks leap into the air, sketching momentary constellations. You imagine how these smiths feel, the future in their fingertips, sensing that bronze can do more than shape tools or weapons. It can shape Rome itself. They melt metal into pools of glowing orange, letting it cool into manageable nuggets, but something in their posture hints that soon these forms will evolve. Soon Rome will begin stamping images, asserting identity, and weaving mythology into commerce. But for now, everything remains simple, heavy, and quietly foundational. As the night deepens again, you follow a trader placing AES Rude into a small leather pouch before setting out on a journey toward the coast. Each step he takes represents early Rome's expanding sphere of interaction. You watch him pause at a rural market, offering a handful of bronze for a sack of olives. The vendor inspects the metal, weighs it, then nods. The transaction feels both cumbersome and intimate, yet beneath this clumsy ritual lies something profound, a trust in material value, a recognition that bronze can stand in for countless goods. This new habit, repeated village after village, binds Rome to its neighbours, fostering trade networks that will one day support legions, bureaucracies, and sprawling cities. You sense the narrative tightening now, preparing for its next evolution, the shift from unmarked bronze to deliberate casting. But before your mind drifts forward, you let yourself linger in this early landscape where Rome is only a cluster of aspirations. You feel the roughness of the bronze, the warmth of cattle penned nearby, the scent of tilled soil. These sensations anchor you in a moment where money is still primitive, where the empire to be sleeps inside these simple lumps, waiting to awaken. And as you exhale, slow and steady, the hills of Rome blur gently, preparing to transform again, shaped not by chance, but by the deliberate hand of a people learning to define themselves through metal, weight, and symbol. The world steadies again as you drift forward, and the rough bronze lumps of early Rome seem to dissolve into the warm haze. The ground beneath your feet firms, the forges grow louder, and the settlement around you appears more organised, as though Rome has taken a slow, deliberate breath and decided it is ready to define itself with clearer lines. You sense the shift before you see it. The people move with greater purpose, their markets larger, their ambitions sharper. Something is changing in the rhythm of exchange, and it draws you toward a newly expanded workshop district where the glow of molten metal paints the walls like sunrise caught before its time. There, on a wide stone floor blackened by years of work, bronze begins to take on a new form, not as formless lumps, but as thick, heavy discs poured into clay moulds. These are AES grave, the cast bronze coins that mark Rome's first confident stride toward monetary identity. You watch as artisans remove the discs with tongs, their arms trembling slightly under the weight. Each coin feels like a declaration, a message carried in metal. Rome is no longer a village improvising with makeshift currency. Rome intends to be recognized. A master smith turns one of the still-warm discs over with the flat of his tool. On its surface is an image, a stylized animal, a mark of value, a symbol everyone in the community understands. This is something fundamentally new. AS Rude relied only on weight. Now, Rome presses meaning directly into its money. Each symbol is a promise, a guarantee backed by the state rather than the whims of individual traders. The coins are thick enough to feel like small shields resting in your palm, their heft speaking of stability and intention. You picture yourself lifting one of these AS grave coins, so much heavier than anything modern. Its weight surprises you, a subtle reminder that early Roman coinage was as much physical reassurance as economic tool. The state wanted every citizen, every soldier, every trader to feel the certainty of value. Heaviness itself became a form of trust. Beyond the workshop, you hear merchants discussing these new coins with cautious enthusiasm. Some marvel at the artistry, others worry the coins are too heavy for daily use. A farmer jokes that carrying a pouch of AS grave might tire a muscle faster than ploughing. Yet even through their humour, you sense admiration. A marked coin can be identified instantly. It no longer requires meticulous weighing. Its image, often a familiar creature like a bull, an eagle, or a mythic figure, anchors its value. And though historians still debate whether the earliest designs symbolize religious devotion, civic pride, or mere practicality, the effect is undeniable. Man now speaks with symbols. You follow a mint official who moves through the workshop with careful authority. He inspects each mould, ensuring thickness and diameter remain consistent, for these coins are not hammered individually but poured, standardized through technique rather than precision tools. You imagine him comparing samples, setting aside flawed pieces, issuing instructions in a calm, measured tone. His presence adds another layer to this transformation. Money has become an administrative responsibility, a matter of governance. The state is learning how to control production, regulate circulation, and embody collective trust through metal. As you step outside, you drift into a bustling marketplace where the new AES grave passes through eager hands. A vendor slices a measure of salted fish, accepting a round coin in return. A mother buys wool for her children and counts out a few heavy discs onto a wooden counter that creaks under their weight. A tax collector at the edge of the square logs payments into a clay tablet, his stylus clicking softly as he records each transaction. These scenes are folded with the warmth of routine settling into place, for once a currency becomes recognizable, it gains life. It circulates like a current of shared understanding. Your awareness softens further as you observe the gradual expansion of these coins' designs. Some now bear denominational marks, helping citizens grasp their relative worth with increasing speed. Others depict gods and goddesses, suggesting the state's attempt to weave divine legitimacy into economics. Jupiter's thunderbolt might appear, or the prow of a ship, symbols chosen to project strength, guidance, or Rome's rising presence across waterways. You sense the layers of meaning deepening. Coins are no longer mere metal, they are messages, compressed narratives that citizens carry in their pouches. The air warms as you drift toward a rural outpost where soldiers gather after a patrol. An officer distributes pay, heavy AES grave falling into calloused hands with solid finality. Some soldiers examine their coins curiously, comparing designs, weighing them, testing their edges. One young recruit lifts a coin toward the firelight and marvels at its symbol of a horse's head. To him, the idea that Rome now presents its identity through stamped images feels noble, almost majestic. And though he does not yet know the enormity of the empire he serves, he senses that something profound is beginning. An organized system that can support armies, supply campaigns, and unify distant regions through shared value. The night deepens again, and you find yourself drifting toward a storage chamber where crates of AS grave are stacked in neat columns. Officials count them with solemn care, tallying reserves for future use. These coins are too heavy to transport casually, and the state often stores large quantities for military and civil needs. You imagine the logistics involved in moving such weight across the early republic's growing territory. Carts creaking under the strain, animals labouring across hills. The burden is literal, yet it symbolizes Rome's determination to manage value physically and visibly. And then you feel something subtle, shifting beneath your feet. Rome is maturing, but the weight of these coins foreshadows a coming dilemma. People appreciate their reliability, yet desire convenience. Heavy bronze is reassuring but impractical for rapid expansion. You can sense the quiet tension that will eventually push Rome toward lighter, more diverse metals. But for now, in this moment, AES grave reigns as the proud emblem of a republic building its identity through carefully marked bronze. You wander past a group of artisans studying newer moulds, some larger, some smaller, some bearing more intricate symbols. They speak in hushed tones about the possibilities. What if Rome could circulate different values more efficiently? What if a consistent system could stretch across the entire peninsula? Their dreams flicker in the forge light, mixing with the scent of smoke and molten metal. The future is forming in these conversations, even if the artisans do not yet understand the vast consequences of their craft. Finally, you let yourself relax into the warm hum of the workshop. Coins cool on wooden trays, workers stretch their tired limbs, the fire crackles as if whispering Rome's early story to the night. And as you stand beside the first coins ever to carry Rome's identity, thick, weighty, marked with intent, you feel the Republic preparing to leap forward into a world where silver will gleam, gold will shine, and currency will pulse at the core of empire. But for now, the heavy bronze discs rest quietly, anchoring Rome's foundation with their unmistakable weight, their images glowing faintly in the lingering firelight as the forge breathes and the night exhales around you. The heavy bronze discs of AS grave settle into the dimness behind you as the world warms with a faint shimmer, as though the air itself is preparing to unveil a brighter metal. You feel the ground tilt gently beneath your awareness, rolling you forward into a republic that has outgrown the weight of its earliest currency. Rome is expanding far beyond its hills, beyond its rivers, beyond the familiar fields where barter once defined daily life. Armies march deeper into the Italian peninsula, merchants follow in their wake, and the city's ambitions pulse with a new intensity. Heavy bronze has served its purpose, but now the rhythms of conquest and trade require something lighter, something more versatile, something that can travel with speed. Your surroundings brighten as sunlight glints off a handful of small silver pieces laid out upon a wooden table. You approach, drawn to the cool gleam. These are the early ancestors of the denarius, though in this moment they exist as experiments, trials in the Republic's search for a coin that can meet the demands of a growing world. Artisans debate the proportions of silver to bronze, the size of each coin, the imagery they should bear. You sense a hum beneath their conversations, an instinctive understanding that silver, precious, bright, and portable, will soon reshape the Roman economy. A merchant unfolds a cloth to reveal coins from Greek cities in southern Italy, drachmae, familiar to traders across the Mediterranean. Their edges are crisp, their designs refined, their weight predictable. Romans studying them murmur among themselves. They know that if they wish to compete in broader markets, their currency must evolve. The influence of Greek coinage is unmistakable, and you feel that influence seeping into Rome's imagination. The Republic is not copying blindly. It is learning, adapting, refining its sense of value. Now you drift into the heart of a military camp where soldiers crowd around a paymaster. Instead of bronze lumps or heavy discs, the men now receive lighter silver pieces, test issues, transitional coins paving the way for the denarius. The soldiers' reactions tell the story without words: relief, curiosity, admiration. They weigh the coins in their hands, testing their balance. For men who march long distances, lighter currency means easier travel, simpler logistics, quicker distribution. Some tuck the silver into leather pouches with a satisfied nod, as though recognizing that this metal fits the Republic's momentum. The campfire crackles, and beyond its light you sense larger forces at work. Rome's victories in the Second Punic War and expanding dominance across the Mediterranean demand a stable, standardized currency. The treasury, once modest, now must handle vast sums collected through tribute, taxation, and spoils of war. Bronze alone cannot support such complexity. Something shinier, something nearly universal must replace it. And so, around 211 BCE, amidst the pressures of war and opportunity alike, Rome introduces the denarius, a silver coin worth 10 bronze asses, a new heartbeat for the Republic. You watch the moment unfold as though standing at the threshold of a mint, where the first true denarii cool on polished stone counters. Their surfaces gleam with meaning. On one side, the helmeted face of Roma, personification of the city itself, stares forward with calm determination. On the other, the Dioscuri ride twin horses, symbols of perfection and divine favour. Holding one is like holding a fragment of Rome's identity, cast not in heavy bronze, but in silver that catches the light like hope itself. As you drift deeper, you see denarii passing quickly through markets, from merchant to shopper to traveller. In a pottery stall, a customer trades a single denarius for a beautiful jar without hesitation. The potter grins, knowing the coin will be accepted across Italy with confidence. This new silver standard has freed people from the constant weighing and verifying that AES Rude once required. One glance, one tap of metal, one familiar image. Trust circulates as surely as the coin itself. In the countryside, farmers find silver coins more convenient for paying taxes. The state can now process revenue efficiently, making it easier to fund roads, aqueducts, and military campaigns. Even in distant outposts, the denarius becomes a unifying presence, a silent envoy of Roman order and reliability. You sense how profoundly a coin can shape identity. Every citizen who handles a denarius is holding the Republic in miniature. But the significance of the denarius is not merely practical. Its rise deepens Rome's sense of itself. Economics blend with psychology, and psychology blends with power. As you glide through memories of bustling markets, you notice how people display more confidence in silver than they ever did in crude bronze. Without lifting her voice, Roma, the figure engraved on each coin, speaks to every person who uses it. The currency becomes a quiet conversation between state and citizen. We are strong, we are stable, we are growing. The denarius also reshapes Rome's relationship with its allies and conquered territories. You follow a caravan crossing southern Italy to a region recently brought under Roman influence. Merchants spread out goods, olive oil, wine, tools, and accept denarii from locals who once traded using Greek drachmae. The transition is surprisingly smooth, as though silver carries its own diplomacy. By making the denarius compatible in weight and purity with Greek coinage, Rome ensures its currency slips naturally into established Mediterranean networks. Yet even as silver brightens the Republic, shadows form at the edges of your awareness. War demands silver, enormous quantities of it. Mines in Hispania, newly under Roman control, pour forth the metal, enabling vast minting operations. You sense the scale growing, the machinery of economy aligning with military ambition. Though the denarius brings unity, it also binds the Republic to a new dependency. The constant need for silver, the constant pressure to sustain confidence. You drift into the Senate House where men in white togas debate monetary policy. Some argue for increasing production to support the army. Others worry about overextension. One senator holds a denarius between his fingers and speaks softly, suggesting that Rome must preserve careful ratios of silver to bronze to avoid undermining trust. Historians still argue whether these early debates reflected deep economic understanding or simple pragmatism, but their voices echo with the seeds of decisions that will shape centuries. The scene fades into another, a workshop where denarii are being struck. Hammer meets die with rhythmic precision, each blow a whisper of future triumphs and future crises. Workers move with practiced coordination, aligning blanks of silver before applying the strike. Sparks flick from the anvils. The finished coins, bright and sharp-edged, fall into wooden trays that fill quickly. You imagine the satisfaction these artisans feel, knowing their craft touches every corner of Rome's life. As night settles, you find yourself beside a solitary trader resting by a roadside shrine. He takes out a few denarii, turning them slowly in his hands. The firelight reflects across Roma's helmet, the horses of the Dioscuri leaping in tiny arcs. He smiles faintly, thinking of how far these coins can travel, how they are welcomed in distant markets, how they represent stability even in turbulent times. He tucks them away, trusting they will carry him safely through uncertain terrain. You sense the path of the denarius stretching far beyond this moment. It will fund wars, inspire reforms, anchor the early empire, and continue circulating even as Rome trembles under future pressures. But in this part of the story, it is young, full of promise, full of clarity. Its creation marks a turning point where Rome steps firmly into the currents of Mediterranean commerce and never looks back. And as you drift forward, the gleam of silver lingers around you like the faint glow of a crescent moon, guiding you deeper into the unfolding story of an empire built not only by swords, but by the quiet certainty of its currency. The silver glow of the young denarius shimmers around you, thinning into the warm dust of roads stretching far beyond Rome's earliest horizons. As you drift forward, the Republic grows busier, richer, and more demanding, like a great creature awakening to its own strength. The denarius has stabilized the heartbeat of daily commerce, yet Rome's appetite pushes every system, military, political, and economic, into new territory. Expansion is no longer an aspiration, it is a constant motion, a vast ripple spreading outward from the city's stone core. With every conquered region, every treaty, every caravan, Rome's treasury swells and strains in equal measure. You find yourself wandering through the Forum, early morning sunlight catching on marble that is still being hauled into place. Vendors prepare their stalls, arranging goods with an efficiency born from long practice. Fishmongers lay out the morning catch, bakers open their ovens to release fragrant bread, and potters display bowls with glazes that shimmer faintly in the rising light. The hum of commerce is steady, familiar, but beneath it you sense deeper changes. The denarius passes from hand to hand, its silver promise binding each transaction. Yet the larger story lies in how the Republic organizes this expanding economy. Through officials, through records, through the machinery of a state learning to manage abundance. You drift into the Temple of Saturn, home of the Aerarium, the state treasury. Inside, the cool air smells faintly of parchment and old bronze. Clerks move with purposeful steps, unrolling scrolls filled with neat columns of numbers, tax revenues from allied cities, payments to contractors building new roads, lists of soldiers awaiting their stipends. Chests of coins line the walls, guarded closely. A senator examines one of the chests, his brow furrowed. He knows that as Rome's influence spreads across the Mediterranean, the logistics of wealth management grow more complex. How much silver is needed for upcoming campaigns? How much bronze must be minted to support local markets? How does the Republic ensure that every soldier, every labourer, every official receives correct payment? As you watch these questions unfold silently in the dim treasury, it becomes clear that the story of the denarius is intertwined with the story of Rome's expanding administrative mind. Wealth is no longer measured only in land or cattle. It is tracked in metal, in numbers, in carefully kept records. A quiet revolution of accountability is taking shape, one that will allow Rome to coordinate vast territories and impose its economic will across continents. You move closer to one of the clerks and observe him tallying taxes collected from Sicily, Rome's first overseas province. The island's grain production now feeds the Republic, and its revenue is collected not in barter or local coinage but in denarii and bronze-associated coinage. The shift is subtle but profound. Rome is exporting its monetary system as efficiently as its legions. A standardized currency means standardized expectations. Rome's allies and subjects must now operate within the Republic's fiscal framework, binding them closer to the center of power. On the streets outside, you feel the effects of this integration in more human ways. A craftsman orders metal tools from a distant workshop, confident the payment he sends will be recognized and respected. A ship captain oversees loading crates of olive oil, his crew receiving wages in silver that will be accepted equally in Corinth, in Carthage, or in Massilia. Even children playing near a fountain mimic the marketplace, pretending to trade small stones as if they were coins, absorbing Rome's new economic rhythms as naturally as they breathe. Your awareness drifts next to a legion encampment far from the capital. The soldiers prepare for another campaign, sharpening swords, repairing sandals, mending cloaks. Their equipment, rations, and wages all hinge on Rome's ability to move money efficiently. Unlike earlier eras, when soldiers might wait weeks for heavy bronze bars to reach them, now they are paid in compact, trust-inspiring silver. The paymaster distributes denarii with a steady hand, recording each transaction carefully. You feel how essential this reliability is. Soldiers fight better when they trust their state to support them. The denarius becomes a symbol of Rome's promise, a quiet, glittering assurance that service will be rewarded. Later, as night settles over the camp, you sense the economic ripple of military success. Spoils taken after battles, gold ornaments, valuable goods, captured coinage, flow into Rome, boosting the treasury. Some loot is melted down and recast into new coins. Some circulates directly, reminding everyone of the rewards of conquest. The economy breathes in and out through the lungs of war. Victories expand the money supply. Losses tighten it. Every military campaign becomes both a political gamble and a financial strategy. You now find yourself moving through a dockside warehouse where workers stack amphorae filled with wine, oil and garum. A merchant oversees the inventory, marking each shipment and assuring his workers that payment will come promptly. His confidence stems from the denarius, which has smoothed long-distance trade and given merchants a dependable tool for negotiation. Foreign traders, once hesitant about dealing with Rome, now accept denarii readily. Some even prefer them to their own city's coinage, impressed by their consistency and wide acceptance. Yet even in this flourishing system, you sense the growing tension between wealth and responsibility. Senators debate whether the Republic is growing too quickly for its own good. Some fear the concentration of wealth in the hands of a few elite families. Others worry about the rising costs of governing distant provinces. Rome's treasury swells with silver, but the demands placed upon it swell even more quickly. You watch a young quaestor studying ledgers late into the night, his candle flickering. He frowns at numbers that do not quite balance, tribute delayed from one city, unexpected expenses in another. The administrative machine hums, but it also groans under the strain of constant expansion. Still, the denarius remains steadfast, a small but potent anchor in a turbulent economy. You drift into a modest Roman household where a father teaches his children how to recognize legitimate coins. He taps the silver gently, listening for the right ring, and shows them the image of Roma, explaining that the coin is a promise backed by the entire Republic. The children smile, repeating his words, turning the coin in their fingers as though holding a piece of the world. As you move onward, this sense of shared identity becomes ever clearer. The denarius unites farmers, soldiers, merchants, officials and families across vast distances. It threads through Rome's political life as well. Candidates for office quietly use silver to fund games, festivals and public works meant to win favour. The economics of influence grow alongside the economics of trade. Wealth becomes a tool of power, and you sense the seeds of future conflicts. Questions of inequality, of corruption, of ambition, rooted in the very structure that now fuels Rome's success. Yet the overarching feeling as you stand within this network of markets, treasuries and distant outposts is one of momentum. Rome has discovered how to turn silver into order, how to use currency not just to facilitate transactions but to shape society, governance and identity. The Republic is no longer a patchwork of regions and interests. It is becoming a coordinated organism, its bloodstream filled with denarii that circulate like messages of unity. You take one last glance at a bustling marketplace, watching the coins glint as they change hands. The Republic is expanding, yes, but it is also consolidating, learning to manage its wealth, to project stability, to weave economic threads into a tapestry that stretches from Hispania to the Aegean. And though stresses lurk at the edges, threatening future turmoil, this moment glows with possibility. The denarius rests at the centre of it all, gleaming quietly, carrying Rome's voice across hills, seas, and generations. And as you drift forward, you feel that voice growing stronger, preparing to confront the costs and pressures that lie just beyond the horizon. The glow of markets and treasuries fades into a darker, more unsettled hue as you drift forward, sensing how Rome's prosperity, so carefully built on silver and expanding order, begins to tremble under new and relentless pressures. The Republic has grown vast, perhaps too vast for its own comfort, and the machinery that once thrived on stability now grinds against the hard edges of ambition, conflict, and debt. You feel the air tighten as legions march across increasingly distant frontiers, each campaign consuming more metal, more manpower, more promises. The financial pulse that once beat so confidently inside the denarius now thuds with strain. You find yourself standing along a dusty road leading toward a Roman military encampment. Soldiers, weary from months away, line up to receive their pay. but something is different. The paymaster looks uneasy, speaking quietly to his assistants. The silver reserves that should have arrived last week are late. Maybe storms delayed the supply caravans. Maybe a regional treasury struggled to gather taxes on time. The soldiers murmur among themselves, shifting restlessly. Even a short delay in payment reminds them how dependent Rome has become on its currency system, and how vulnerable that system is when stretched thin by war. As the restless crowd grows louder, you sense a deeper truth hovering beneath the scene. Every conquest that enriches Rome also burdens it. Troops must be paid on time, whether home or abroad, and the denarius, bright symbol of the Republic's confidence, must flow constantly to keep armies loyal. Without silver, even the mightiest general risks mutiny. You feel the tension between Rome's pride and its finances, two forces pulling at the same thread. You drift into the Senate House, where heated debates swirl like smoke above the assembled men. Voices rise in impassioned pleas. One senator argues for increased taxes to fund campaigns in the East. Another insists the state must borrow more from wealthy families. Rome's elite, many enriched through earlier conquests, begin lending money to the Republic itself, an arrangement that grows increasingly dangerous. When a state borrows heavily from its own powerful citizens, financial pressure becomes political leverage. A young senator unrolls a wax tablet crowded with figures. He points to columns showing military expenses rising year after year. Grain shipments cost more than ever. Supply lines extend farther. Mercenaries demand higher wages. Even the production of denarii strains the mints, as silver must be sourced from mines that require constant supervision and protection. The senator's voice trembles slightly as he raises a possibility some find unthinkable. What if Rome cannot keep pace with its own expansion? The chamber falls silent for a breath, just one, but in that breath you feel the Republic's fragility. Outside the Senate, the city bustles blindly onward, but in small rooms behind taverns and quiet corners of marketplaces, ordinary Romans whisper about increasing taxes, about debts piling up, about veterans returning from war with little to show for their service. Wealth concentrates in fewer hands. Land is seized to repay loans. Families once prosperous now teeter on the edge of ruin. The economy, made magnificent by conquest, now trembles under the weight of its own contradictions. You step into the home of a modest tradesman who struggles to pay his debts. His shelves are half empty, his tools worn. A stern creditor waits at his table, tapping a stylus impatiently. If the tradesman cannot make payment in denarii soon, the creditor may claim his property. The man's wife watches with worried eyes, clutching a small purse of coins, aware that she will likely need every denarius to buy food for their children. You feel her fear through the stillness. Money, once a symbol of stability, now becomes an instrument of coercion. Beyond individual households, the pressure of war spills into the value of coinage itself. Rome needs more denarii than ever, yet silver supplies are not infinite. You drift into a mint where workers labour endlessly to produce coins. The overseer discusses reducing silver purity ever so slightly to stretch the supply. It is not yet debasement, not yet the crisis that will erupt in future centuries, but the discussion plants an uneasy seed. Rome is beginning to consider altering the essence of its money to satisfy immediate needs. As you move farther into the Republic's troubled landscape, you find yourself among the restless poor gathering in the streets. These are men who once owned land, who once paid taxes proudly, who once walked with confidence. But wars have displaced them. Debts have crushed them. Many now depend on grain distributions to survive. Their voices rise in frustration, calling upon leaders to protect them from creditors and reduce the burden of military levies. You listen as one of them laments, "Rome conquers the world, yet we cannot conquer our hunger." The political tension thickens. Populares leaders champion the poor, proposing reforms to relieve debt and limit interest. Optimates resist fiercely, fearing their property and wealth will be threatened. The clash is not merely ideological, it is economic at its core. Currency, taxation and debt are the invisible forces steering these political battles, feeding unrest that will eventually erupt into open conflict. The night deepens around you as you drift toward a field camp miles from Rome, where a general reads a troubling letter from the Senate. Funds are short, reinforcements delayed, supplies uncertain. His jaw tightens as he contemplates marching deeper into enemy territory without adequate support. The soldiers watch him carefully. They know their fate depends not only on strategy, but on the invisible flow of silver from the distant republic. Back in Rome, tension builds as tribunes propose radical debt relief. Crowds cheer, elites rage. You sense the republic approaching a breaking point, its economic fractures widening into political fault lines. The denarius, once a unifying symbol, has become a contested instrument of power. Whoever controls the treasury controls the republic's future. You drift next into the home of a wealthy equestrian, a man with influence in banking and trade. He inspects ledgers showing rising profits, yet his expression remains troubled. Even he, beneficiary of the system, knows how unstable it has become. The Republic cannot sustain eternal war without reforming how it manages resources, but reform threatens the very class that profits from the status quo. Wealth and duty clash in uneasy silence. As you watch this man pace the room, fingers tapping against his ledger, you realize that Rome's currency system, its silver lifeline, is stretched between competing interests. Soldiers need pay, citizens need relief, the treasury needs revenue, the wealthy demand protection for their assets, the politicians crave influence. Every denarius minted carries conflicting expectations, bearing a weight far heavier than its modest grams of silver. You drift into a dreamlike montage. Fields scorched by armies, caravans struggling along mountain passes, merchants haggling over uncertain prices, senators arguing beneath marble columns. Through all of it you see hands exchanging denarii, sometimes eagerly, sometimes reluctantly, sometimes in desperation. Silver shines and flickers, illuminating both prosperity and tension. By now the Republic feels like a vast mechanism pushing itself to its limits. Growth has brought riches, but also strain. Victory has brought glory, but also cost. Economic pressure coils around political turmoil, tightening like a rope. And though the denarius continues to circulate, its steady glow cannot mask the growing instability. You feel the world shifting, preparing for even greater upheavals, ones that will reshape the Republic entirely. But for this moment, you linger in the quiet between storms, sensing the fragile balance of a society struggling to sustain its own success. And as you drift forward, the pressure of war, debt, and expansion follows like a distant rumble, foreshadowing the transformations Rome cannot avoid. The rumble of strain reverberates behind you as the world softens again, and now you drift toward a moment when Rome's currency becomes something more than metal, something political, personal, and startlingly human. The Republic's tensions simmer at the surface, ready to erupt, and at the centre of this gathering storm stands a figure whose shadow stretches across the entire Mediterranean, Gaius Julius Caesar. You feel history tilt, the way a ship leans before a sudden wind. Rome is not only fighting wars or balancing ledgers, it is reshaping the very symbols through which power is expressed. Your awareness settles into the bustling streets of Rome, where rumours swirl like dust in sunlight. Caesar has defeated his rivals, he has crossed the Rubicon, he has placed one foot upon the neck of tradition itself. People whisper his name with awe, fear, admiration, resentment. And in this atmosphere of upheaval, even Rome's coinage shifts to reflect a world turning upside down. You stride toward a mint where workers labour beneath torchlight. Until now, the images stamped upon coins have always avoided depicting living men. Rome has long prided itself on collective identity, on symbols and gods rather than mortal rulers. But this night feels heavy with anticipation. A new die lies on the work table, gleaming faintly. The artisans gather around it, glancing at each other with a mixture of respect and unease. For the first time in Rome's long monetary tradition, a living Roman's portrait is about to be struck into silver. You look closer, and there he is. Caesar, his profile carved with decisive lines, laurel wreath crowning his brow, his jaw firm, expression calm, gaze outward as if surveying the empire he is reshaping. The portrait is unmistakably human, unmistakably political. This is no mythic figure, no deity, no allegory. This is a man telling Rome, I am the state. The artisans hesitate only briefly before beginning their work. Hammer meets die. A sharp metallic ring fills the chamber. Again and again silver blanks transform beneath the blows into denarii bearing Caesar's face. Each coin glimmers with the audacity of its new message. Each one circulates as a small portable proclamation of power. You drift into Rome's marketplaces, where citizens crowd together in excitement and curiosity. A fruit seller holds up a new denarius, studying Caesar's likeness. She has never seen the face of a living ruler on a coin before. Is this allowed? She whispers. A nearby veteran, one of Caesar's loyal soldiers, responds proudly. It is more than allowed. It is right. He brought us victory, land, peace. Yet across the square an elderly senator mutters that the Republic's customs are dying. Only kings do this, he says. Only tyrants place their faces on money. The coin has become more than currency. It is a catalyst, a mirror reflecting Rome's fractured identity. You drift now to a legion encampment where soldiers gather around a campfire. They pass the new coins between them, joking lightly, but beneath their amusement lies genuine admiration. Caesar's portrait makes their loyalty tangible. The denarius becomes a reminder of oaths sworn and victories earned. Many soldiers feel their pay now carries recognition, as though Caesar himself acknowledges them through each stamped likeness. But farther away, in quiet villas and political back rooms, others interpret the coins differently. To the senators who resist Caesar's dominance, the portrait feels like a warning, like a boundary crossed. They worry that Rome's customs, carefully guarded for centuries, are unravelling under the strain of one man's ambition. They whisper that Caesar's likeness on coinage is not vanity alone. It is propaganda, a subtle invasion of every home and every transaction. Historians still argue whether Caesar intended the portrait as a claim to kingship or merely as a symbol of authority in chaotic times. But as you observe the coins spread, the effect is undeniable. Every Roman now carries a piece of Caesar's image in their pocket. Every market stall, every tavern, every roadside transaction repeats his presence. The denarius becomes a medium through which his power circulates. You drift toward the Senate House on the Ides of March. You do not reenact the violence, but you sense the tension that precedes it. The portrait coins clink in the pouches of men who feel threatened by the centralization of authority. They resent the image pressed upon their daily lives. They fear the erosion of the Republic's foundations. Caesar may not be physically present in this moment, but his silver likeness certainly is, silent, gleaming, provocative. When the deed is done and the conspirators stand over the fallen leader, the air feels cold. A new uncertainty permeates Rome. Yet even now, the denarii bearing Caesar's face do not disappear. They continue circulating, an echo of his unresolved legacy. Some citizens hoard them, some spend them quickly, some refuse to touch them at all. The coin has become a relic of a moment when Rome crossed from the world of tradition into the world of personal rule. You drift onward, following the aftermath. Mark Antony uses Caesar's image to rally supporters, emphasizing his deeds and generosity. Octavian, Young, calculating, recognizes the power of imagery too. He studies Caesar's coins, studying how a face can command loyalty. You watch him turn one over thoughtfully, understanding more deeply than anyone how currency can shape public perception. Soon Octavian will mint his own coins, some honouring Caesar as a deified figure, others preparing Rome to accept himself as heir and leader. Through silver he will guide the Republic toward an empire. But for now, your attention lingers on the moment when portraiture entered Roman coinage like a spark in dry grass. The denarius, once a symbol of shared identity, has become a battleground for meaning. A piece of metal less than 4 grams has carried the debate between tyranny and tradition, between stability and ambition. You find yourself once more in a quiet Roman home at dusk. A child studies a denarius under lamplight, tracing Caesar's laurel crown with a small finger. He does not understand politics, nor the upheaval swirling around the figure on the coin. To him it is simply a face, strong, calm, familiar, a face he sees more often than his father's, who is away with the legions, a face woven into the fabric of daily life. Coins, you realize, are not just currency. They are stories told in metal. And in Caesar's case, the story is one of transformation, of a republic stepping over a threshold it can never uncross. As you drift toward the next chapter, the silver portrait seems to follow your gaze, half lit by the torchlight, its expression both serene and unsettling, as though aware of the empire it has helped inaugurate. Caesar's silver portrait fades into the trembling air around you, dissolving like a reflection, disturbed in water. When the haze clears, you feel the world reorganizing itself, slowly at first, then with the sweeping certainty of a tide pulling everything into a new shape. The Republic is gone, or at least the illusion of it. In its place rises a young man with old ambitions, a figure who has studied every lesson Caesar offered, and every mistake he made. You sense his presence long before he steps into view. Octavian, soon to be Augustus, architect of a reimagined Rome, and of a currency system bright enough to stabilize an empire. You drift into a quiet chamber where Octavian stands over a table strewn with maps, reports, and coins, Caesar's coins among them. He lifts one, turning it in his fingers. The lamplight glances off the silver, illuminating the features of his adoptive father who now belongs to myth as much as memory. Octavian studies the coin without speaking. His brow is calm, but the intensity in his eyes reveals what he understands better than anyone. Money is not just an economic tool. It is narrative. It is persuasion. It is the subtle architecture of belief. He places the coin down and signals for his advisors. They gather, discussing the condition of Rome after years of civil war. The treasury is strained, confidence is fragile, provinces grumble, soldiers expect steady pay. Yet Octavian, with patience and clear strategy, knows that stabilizing Rome means stabilizing its currency, giving it a new center of gravity, a new glow of trust. He begins a series of reforms that will define Rome's golden age, shaping every denarius, every sestertius, every aureus that glimmers in the centuries to come. You drift now to the first of these reforms. The mints, once stretched thin and politically weaponized, are brought firmly under central control. Standards of weight and purity are tightened. No longer will coinage fluctuate according to the whims of competing generals. No longer will imagery be used merely to shout one man's ambition. Under Augustus, coinage becomes a language of harmony, projecting stability, divine favour, and imperial dignity. In a vast workshop newly reorganized under imperial oversight, molten metal glows like small suns. Artisans pour gold into moulds preparing the aureus, the empire's most prestigious coin. You approach one of these golden pieces as it cools, its surface slowly revealing a portrait of Augustus, serene, youthful, composed. Unlike Caesar's proud declaration of self, Augustus's portrait communicates continuity, restraint, order. The message is subtle but unmistakable. Rome has an emperor, but he is not a tyrant. He is the steward of peace, the guardian of prosperity. The aureus, smaller than you expect yet radiant with promise, becomes the backbone of imperial finance. Gold is not used for everyday trade. It anchors the wealth of the state, pays legions, funds massive construction projects, and circulates among merchants engaged in high-value trade. Its purity, remarkably consistent, earns trust across the empire's farthest edges. You drift from gold to silver. The denarius, refined under Augustus, gleams brighter than ever. Its weight is consistent, its purity steadfast. On one side, Augustus looks outward with calm authority. On the other, symbols of peace and renewal tell the story Rome wants its people to believe. A laurel wreath here, a temple there, a comet streaking across the sky, Caesar's star used now to affirm Augustus's connection to the divine. You find yourself in a bustling market along the Tiber, where these coins circulate freely. A fishmonger praises the new denarii, saying they feel trustworthy, as though the metal itself has a heartbeat. A cloth merchant counts out aurei with reverence, knowing each piece will hold its value from one end of the empire to the other. Even a ragged youth selling figs glances proudly at the denarius he earns, its imagery promising that despite his modest station, he belongs to a stable world. As the market's shouts blur together, you drift toward the imperial treasury where scribes record revenue with renewed confidence. Taxes arrive in predictable form now: silver denarii from Italy, bronze sestertii from local markets, gold aurei from wealthy estates and long-distance trade. The treasury hums like a well-tuned instrument. Augustus's reforms have transformed chaos into order, and that order radiates outward, stabilizing everything it touches. Soon you find yourself at the edge of a Roman road stretching across the countryside. Merchants travel with ease, trusting the coinage in their purses. Soldiers march with discipline, receiving regular pay in coins, whose images remind them of the peace Augustus claims to have restored, the Pax Romana. You sense how deeply this stability shapes the consciousness of the empire. People believe in the currency not only because it is well made, but because it represents a world that finally feels predictable after decades of conflict. You drift into a mint in Lugdunum, far from Rome itself. Here too coins bearing Augustus's image are produced with meticulous care. The empire is too vast for one mint alone. Regional mints ensure steady supply. Yet despite the distance, the quality remains uniform. This consistency makes the Roman coinage system one of the most admired of the ancient world. A gold aureus struck in Gaul can be trusted just as much as one struck in Rome. Over time, new designs appear. Personifications of abundance, cornucopiae overflowing with grain, ships guiding commerce, altars symbolizing harmony. These images tell a story even to those who cannot read. Coins become tiny, portable monuments to the emperor's achievements. They celebrate peace, prosperity, construction of aqueducts, expansion of roads. They show Augustus not as a warlord, but as a father of his people. You drift into a quiet countryside villa where an elderly farmer stores his savings. He spreads his coins on a small wooden table, gold, silver, bronze, and smiles in relief. The coins feel solid, honest. The images reassure him that the distant emperor thinks of people like him, that the peace he enjoys today will last. In his lifetime he has known civil war, famine, uncertainty. Yet now the steady gleam of coinage in his hand gives him hope. It is stability he can touch. But you sense something else beneath this serenity. Augustus has mastered the art Caesar first explored. He understands the power of imagery and consistency, yet wields it with far greater subtlety. His coinage does not shout. It whispers. It reassures. It guides Rome toward accepting a new political reality, not a republic restored, but an empire disguised as one. The air warms as you drift toward the final years of Augustus's life. His portrait ages gracefully on the coins, reinforcing continuity even as new heirs appear on silver and gold. Tiberius, his successor, is quietly introduced on some issues, easing Rome toward the next chapter with the same careful choreography that has defined Augustus's rule. You linger for a moment in this golden age, or what appears to be one. The empire is thriving. Trade extends across deserts, seas, mountains. Roads carry soldiers and goods with unparalleled efficiency. The denarius and aureus bind it all together, metal veins in the body of a vast and complicated organism. As you drift onward, the coins in your imagination glow softly, gold steady as sunlight, silver bright as moonlit water, bronze warm as earth. Together they form the monetary system that will support Rome's grandeur for generations. But beyond this golden glow, you sense movement, a long road stretching toward distant provinces and foreign markets. The empire is vast now, reaching far beyond the dreams of its founders, and soon Rome's currency will travel with merchants across continents, carried by trade winds into lands where the eagle standard never flew. The golden shimmer of Augustus's aurea softens as the world around you stretches outward, far beyond the marble forums, beyond the frontier forts, beyond the carefully plotted Roman roads. You feel the empire expanding not through conquest this time, but through movement, through trade, through the quiet exchange of objects, ideas, promises, and coins that carry Rome's identity into lands the legions may never set foot upon. A warm breeze touches your cheek, scented with spices unfamiliar to Italy, and at once you understand. Roman currency has become a passport of trust, enabling merchants to venture into places where Rome exists only as rumour. Your awareness settles upon the bustling port of Ostia, Rome's gateway to the wider world. Ships crowd the harbour, their sails snapping in the wind like restless wings. Dockworkers shout as amphorae are hoisted from vessels arriving from Spain, Africa, Egypt and Greece. You drift among the merchants, Greeks, Syrians, Jews, Nabateans, each speaking different tongues, yet all accepting the same bright denarius. A trader from Alexandria gestures excitedly as he receives payment in silver. He bites the coin gently, nods, and tucks it into his purse. The consistency of Roman coinage is known across the Mediterranean, making trade smoother, faster, safer. You follow a merchant caravan preparing to depart from the port. Its camels groan under the weight of goods. Wool, glassware, olive oil, wine, bronze tools and amphorae, filled with garum, Rome's beloved fish sauce. These items will travel far farther than any senator imagines when legislating from the Curia. The denarii jingling in the merchants' belts will accompany them, as trusted as water in their flasks. As you drift with the caravan onto a Roman road stretching eastward, the landscape shifts. Vineyards give way to rolling hills, then to rocky outcroppings dotted with shrines to unfamiliar gods. At every outpost, Roman coins change hands. A soldier buys supplies using a few sestertii. A local farmer sells grain and accepts silver denarii without hesitation. Near a provincial border, you watch merchants from distant Palmyra approach with caravans rich in incense and silk. Their eyes glimmer with recognition at the sight of the Roman coins, evidence of a stable economic system they can rely on. You travel with them through the fertile lands of Syria, where Roman and local cultures blend naturally. Markets here overflow with brilliant fabrics, carved ivory, spices so fragrant they seem to lift the very air, and exotic animals that astonish newcomers. A Palmyrene merchant examines a gold aureus, nodding with satisfaction. Roman gold, he says to his companion, is welcome anywhere. Indeed, the aureus is prized even in kingdoms that do not share Roman borders. Its purity is so trusted that it becomes a favoured medium for large transactions beyond the empire's reach. You drift now into a caravanserai at the edge of the desert, one of many safe havens that link trade routes stretching eastward. Merchants gather around a fire, eating dates and flatbread while discussing their destinations. Some plan to travel as far as Petra, others hope to reach the Persian Gulf where ships bound for India await cargo. A few speak hesitantly of the Silk Road, its perils, its vastness, its promise. They know Roman coins won't circulate deep into Central Asia, but Roman gold will always be accepted for its metal value. In those far-off lands, people recognize the authority of Rome not through legions, but through the weight and purity of its coins. As night falls over the caravanserai, you slip into a dreamlike journey along desert trade routes. The stars shimmer above dunes that stretch endlessly, and the rhythmic clinking of coins in merchants' pouches merges with the sway of camel steps. The Roman economy breathed through these travellers. Every denarius spent abroad eventually returns home through trade, carrying with it the faint echo of foreign markets. Soon you find yourself wandering the markets of Petra, the rose-red city carved into living stone. The air is thick with incense. Traders haggle beneath towering facades, exchanging Roman denarii, Nabatean silver, Arabian perfumes, and spices carried from distant kingdoms. Roman coins pass easily from hand to hand, bridging cultures separated by languages but united by economic trust. A Nabatean jeweller accepts an aureus for an intricately carved amulet. He weighs it carefully, nods approvingly at its precise mass, and slips it into a secure pouch. To him, the aureus is more than currency. It is a foundation for negotiation, a reliable metric in a world of fluctuating values. You drift westward now, toward Africa, where Roman ships dock at bustling cities like Carthage and Leptis Magna. Here, trade flows not along desert routes but across the glittering sea. Grain, olives, figs, ivory, and exotic beasts destined for Roman arenas fill the warehouses. Coins clink constantly in the hands of buyers and sellers. A Roman official pays a group of African fishermen for a massive catch using standardized bronze coinage, and nearby a wealthy merchant purchases ivory using array. These transactions, small and large, define Rome's connection to Africa as strongly as any legion. Farther still, you find yourself pulled toward Egypt, Rome's jewel of abundance. In Alexandria, the empire's intellectual and economic powerhouse, markets hum with mathematical precision. Scholars debate philosophy near the docks. Libraries teem with knowledge. Merchants handle goods from every corner of the ancient world. Roman coinage circulates effortlessly, mingling with local bronze issues, enabling a thriving economy that feeds Rome with grain year after year. You wander through a spice stall where a merchant wraps cinnamon in linen and accepts payment in clean denarii. He smiles as he turns the coin over. "Stability," he says softly. "That is the Roman gift." From Egypt, your awareness sweeps across the Red Sea to ports where cargo ships from India unload silk, pepper, cinnamon, pearls and gemstones. Roman coins appear here too, not in daily markets, but in larger exchange transactions. Hoards uncovered centuries later will reveal Roman gold buried deep in Indian soil, evidence of a thriving trade relationship carried out by merchants willing to risk dangerous seas to reach foreign markets hungry for Roman metal. You drift back westward, following the faint scent of resin and salt. Soon the cool air of northern Europe wraps around you. Along the Rhine and the Danube, frontier forts thrum with activity. Soldiers stationed in these distant lands receive their pay in silver denarii, spending them at local markets where tribesmen accept them eagerly. To many northern peoples, Roman coins become prized ornaments, sometimes woven into bracelets or displayed as amulets. They represent the prestige of Rome, its wealth, its order, its mysterious power. In Britannia, merchants trade tin, wool, and hides for Roman goods. Denarii jingle in leather pouches carried along muddy roads. A Celtic craftsman melts down a few worn Roman coins to create a decorative brooch, admiring their high silver content. Even here, at the edge of the known world, Roman currency exerts its quiet influence. You drift now into a small tavern along the Rhine frontier. Inside, Roman soldiers drink with Germanic traders, exchanging stories and goods alike. A deal is struck across the table, a rare fur for 3 denarii. The trader accepts the coins with cautious respect. He may not worship the Roman gods or follow Roman laws, but he trusts Roman silver. Even beyond the empire, the denarius becomes a bridge between cultures that might otherwise remain worlds apart. You sense now the larger truth beneath all these scenes. Trade is the empire's circulatory system, and coins are the blood that keeps it alive. Roads and sea routes form the arteries, carrying wealth and goods to every corner. Rome's economic power lies not only in the resources it controls, but in the trust its currency commands from strangers living hundreds or even thousands of miles away. As you drift toward the horizon of this expansive network, the imagery around you softens into a map made of shimmering lines, roads glowing like veins, seas pulsing like tides, desert routes sparkling faintly under moonlight. Along every path, coins move quietly, telling Rome's story to distant lands and returning with distant stories folded into their journeys. And somewhere ahead, just beyond the reach of this prosperity, you feel the first hints of subtle erosion, a thinning of silver, a shift in priorities, a breeze of uncertainty that whispers through the empire's distant markets. For now, though, the Roman coin shines brightly, trusted, carried, exchanged, admired across continents, a symbol of unity in a world rich with differences. The shimmering trade routes begin to blur, their bright currents dimming as though a thin veil has been drawn across the empire's vast map. You feel the warmth of prosperity recede, replaced by a subtle chill, a quiet erosion at first, so gentle it might have gone unnoticed by the merchants, soldiers, and families who relied on the steady glint of silver. Yet now, as you drift deeper into Rome's unfolding story, that erosion sharpens into awareness. The silver in the denarius is thinning, not dramatically, not catastrophically, not yet, but enough for sharp eyes to notice, enough to send murmurs of uncertainty through the markets. You find yourself returning to a mint where years earlier, Augustus's reforms filled the empire with gleaming confidence. Now the atmosphere feels different. Artisans still work with precision, but overseers speak in low, tense voices. Silver shipments from the mines of Hispania arrive less frequently. Costs rise, troops must be paid, roads maintained, grain imported during shortages. The empire's borders stretch across hostile frontiers that demand constant attention. Officials calculate and recalculate the treasury's needs, and slowly, quietly, a compromise takes shape. Reduce the silver content just a little. A new batch of denarii lies cooling on a tray. At first glance, they look identical to earlier issues. Sharp edges, proud imagery, familiar weight. But when one worker lifts a coin and studies it against the light, the difference reveals itself. The metal's inner tone is slightly duller, its surface just a touch less bright. He frowns but says nothing. The order comes from men far above his station. His task is to strike coins, not to question policy. You drift into a marketplace where these newer coins begin to circulate. For most citizens, the change is invisible. They trade, haggle, save, and spend with the same ease as before. Bread is purchased, wine is poured, taxes are paid. Life moves on. Yet a few merchants, those with keen instincts honed by decades of weighing silver and assessing purity, begin to sense the difference. They argue quietly over whether the alloy feels lighter, whether the ring of the metal sounds less clear. One elderly jeweller shakes his head and mutters that Rome's silver is growing tired. Still the empire marches forward, literally. You drift toward the northern frontier, where legions face unrest among Germanic tribes. The paymaster distributes denarii to the soldiers, who accept them without hesitation. War, after all, does not pause for economic adjustments. The legions require constant funding, and as the decades pass, their numbers grow. Each new cohort, each defensive fort, each campaign pushes the treasury further. When silver cannot keep up, the alloy thins again, gradually, strategically, almost imperceptibly. Historians still argue whether the earliest stages of debasement were deliberate or simply the product of the logistical constraints. Some say emperors sought fiscal flexibility, others believe circumstances forced their hand. But as you watch the slow evolution of Rome's coinage, you sense a truth that transcends debate. Once a currency begins to lose purity, trust becomes a fragile thing. You glide into a provincial town where money changers sit beneath shaded awnings, sorting coins from across the empire. Here, the differences are noticed more clearly. Some denarii gleam bright, older issues still rich in silver. Others appear slightly greyish, their sheen subdued. The money changers test them meticulously, weighing them, biting them lightly, listening to their metallic song. They adjust exchange rates subtly. A bright denarius fetches more foreign coin, a newer one slightly less. Ordinary citizens bristle at these distinctions, but the changers shrug. Value changes, they say. Metal tells the truth. You drift deeper into time, where emperors rise and fall with increasing rapidity. Some, like Nero, turn to debasement as a tool to fund lavish projects or soothe political unrest. Others inherit depleted treasuries and choose debasement as the least destructive option left. Silver melts, alloys shift, purity dwindles. The denarius still carries the empire's symbols: eagles, gods, portraits, monuments, but beneath those images lies a quiet diminishing. As purity declines, prices begin to change. A farmer selling grain demands more coins for the same amount of wheat. A cobbler raises the cost of sandals. A merchant shipping goods to distant regions doubles his fees to account for uncertainty in the value of the money he will receive. None call this inflation, not yet, but they feel it. They live it. The denarius still exists, but its purchasing power slowly fades, like a candle burning low. In Rome itself, senators debate financial reforms. Some propose opening new mines. Others call for increased taxation or borrowing or austerity. Yet the empire's needs are vast. Public works, military defence, grain distributions, provincial administration. These responsibilities do not shrink when revenue struggles. You stand in a crowded Senate chamber where an official unrolls a tablet showing rising expenses. His voice trembles as he suggests reducing the weight of silver coins once more. A wave of murmurs sweeps the room. The question is not whether Rome should debase its currency. It is whether Rome can afford not to. You drift now into the lives of ordinary Romans. A baker examines a pile of denarii and realizes they no longer cover his flour costs. He raises prices reluctantly. A mother buying oil counts her coins twice and then 3 times, confused by how little they purchase compared to last season. A retired soldier living on his savings feels the value of his carefully hoarded denarii slipping away with each passing year. These subtle but persistent shifts become the quiet backdrop of daily life, an undercurrent of weariness that settles into the bones of a vast society. Your awareness moves outward again, travelling along Rome's far-reaching trade routes. Merchants who once prized the denarius begin to express caution. In some regions, foreign traders now prefer gold. In others, they demand additional coins to cover the risk of lower purity. The denarius, once the trusted companion of caravans, loses a little of its shine, literally and metaphorically. Yet not all is decline. The empire still stands strong. Roads still channel goods across continents. Ports still overflow with cargo. For every merchant who grumbles about silver content, another continues trading without concern. Trust may be fraying, but it does not break all at once. Like fabric worn thin through years of use, the currency system still holds, just barely. You drift into the treasury, where officials struggle to balance books etched with numbers that grow more troubling each year. They sketch plans for new mints, new alloys, new denominations. Some suggest shifting toward a trimetal system, emphasizing gold stability. Others recommend further reductions in silver content to stretch dwindling resources. The debates echo off marble walls, revealing the growing anxiety of those responsible for the empire's financial health. In one corner, an exhausted scribe copies a report indicating that the silver content has fallen again by a few percentage points. He pauses, rubbing his temples. "If this continues," he whispers, "we may one day hold coins that remember what silver felt like but no longer contain it." Outside in the late afternoon light, children play a simple game with worn denarii. They flip the coins, laughing, delighted by the glint that remains. To them, the metal is still magical, still meaningful, still Rome. And in their laughter you hear the lingering strength of a world not yet broken, just weathered. But the breeze of uncertainty remains, brushing lightly against your cheek. The pressure that once strained the Republic now presses upon the Empire. The denarius, once the pure, bright heart of Roman commerce, is losing its brilliance, and with it, the Empire loses a piece of its confidence. You drift onward, sensing the acceleration of instability ahead. Emperors who rule for months instead of years, legions who demand higher pay, treasuries struggling against crises, and a currency system pushed beyond its limits. The silver thins, the tension thickens. The next era is shaped not by trade winds, but by storms. The storms gather before you even see them. The thinning silver of the denarius becomes an omen, a faint metallic whisper of the deeper turmoil approaching, an age when emperors rise and fall with the boom speed of unsettled breaths, when chaos becomes the empire's unwelcome companion, and when the currency that once held Rome together trembles under relentless demands. You drift now into a century that feels jagged at the edges, where power shifts not in decades but in months, and where the clatter of coinage mixes with the distant roar of unrest. The world steadies around the year 235 CE, and you find yourself on a windswept military frontier where the news arrives like a lightning strike. The emperor has been killed by his own troops. Then another emperor rises. Then another. Over the next decades, the empire will witness dozens of rulers, some brave, some desperate, many forgotten, each elevated by the army and each vulnerable to the army's dissatisfaction. Historians will later call them the barracks emperors, men whose legitimacy rests on unpredictable loyalties rather than law or tradition. You walk through a legion's camp where soldiers gather around a newly proclaimed emperor, delivering a speech meant to secure their devotion. His armour gleams, but his eyes betray exhaustion. He promises higher pay, more donatives, greater privileges. The troops cheer, not out of admiration, but out of expectation. They know they hold the power, and you feel the weight of this moment. Each promise requires coin, and each coin demands silver the treasury no longer has. The emperor turns to his advisors once the cheers fade. "Find the funds," he says quietly. But the advisors know the truth. The treasury is strained beyond measure. Provinces revolt, borders crack, plagues spread, and foreign threats gather like wolves around a wounded stag. Something must give, and too often, in this era, what gives is the purity of Rome's currency, You drift to a mint where the pressure manifests in metal. Silver blanks are poured thinner. Alloys shift once more, copper now intruding boldly into what should be bright silver. The resulting denarius is duller, lighter, cheaper. A worker holds one up and frowns. It looks almost ghostly compared to older issues. Yet production must continue, for the emperor requires vast quantities of coinage to pay soldiers whose loyalty is increasingly bought one campaign at a time. Outside in the streets of a provincial town, ordinary citizens notice the change immediately. A merchant slams a handful of new coins on the table. "What am I supposed to do with these?" he demands. "They barely look like silver." A money changer shrugs helplessly. "They're all the same now," he replies. "Take them, or take nothing." The merchant grumbles but pockets them, knowing resistance won't reverse the decline. Inflation rises with a steady, unkind rhythm. Prices that once seemed predictable suddenly leap. A loaf of bread costs twice what it did months before. Oil, wine, clothing, everything shifts. A farmer selling grain demands more and more denarii, pointing at the coin's fading brightness as proof that they are worth less. People begin hoarding older coins whenever they can find them, creating a small hidden economy of good silver, traded discreetly among those who understand the difference. You drift through Rome itself, where the Senate's authority has waned. Many senators seem resigned, overshadowed by the military generals controlling the frontiers. Yet even they feel the sting of instability. Taxes increase, but revenue decreases in value as debased coins flood the economy. Government services deteriorate. Roads fall into disrepair. Local issues pile up like debris at the base of a crumbling monument. And as all this unfolds, external threats intensify. Germanic tribes test Rome's weakened resolve along the Rhine and Danube. Sasanian forces rise in the east, confident and organized. Each conflict requires immediate payments to troops, mercenaries, and supply chains. Each victory, or setback, demands fresh coinage. The mints produce more than ever, yet each piece contains less silver than the last. You drift now into a small home where a mother tries to buy bread with coins she saved from her late husband's soldier's pay. The baker hesitates, examining the dull pieces. "These," he says doubtfully, "they barely cover half a loaf." The mother's face falls. She had counted on these coins to feed her children. But the baker, who must buy flour at rising prices, cannot accept them except at their new, diminished value. The scene is quiet, intimate, and devastating. A reminder that the crisis unfolding in imperial palaces and military camps reaches directly into the lives of ordinary families. In another part of the empire, perhaps North Africa, perhaps Gaul, soldiers mutter about their wages. The money they receive buys less each month. Some demand payment in goods instead of coinage. Others threaten rebellion unless bonuses are granted. Their commanders scramble to maintain order, but behind their authority lies the fragile reality of Rome's finances. A coin that does not inspire confidence cannot inspire loyalty. You drift further into the century, watching the denarius lose its identity, replaced gradually by new denominations like the Antoninianus. It is introduced with optimistic intent, meant to help streamline large payments. But like its predecessor, it too suffers rapid debasement. Within decades, the Antoninianus contains so little silver that its surface merely imitates the sheen of purity with a thin wash that quickly rubs away. Soldiers mocking the coin call it bronze dressed as silver. As confidence erodes, bartering resurfaces in some regions. Farmers trade grain directly for tools or livestock. Merchants accept payment in goods rather than coins. Local authorities mint emergency bronze pieces to sustain small markets. Rome, once the master of monetary stability, now finds parts of its empire slipping into fragmented economic systems where centralized currency holds only symbolic authority. Yet in this turmoil, adaptation persists. You drift into a frontier outpost where a clever official establishes a controlled exchange system. Old silver coins are accepted for special vouchers, redeemable for supplies at fixed rates. It is a patchwork solution, but it works temporarily, soothing tempers and keeping trade alive in the region. Elsewhere, communities bury hoards of older silver coins, trusting the earth more than the markets. Centuries later, archaeologists will uncover these hoards, silent testimony to a population desperate to preserve value in a time of uncertainty. The pace of imperial succession accelerates. One emperor is proclaimed by the legions, another is assassinated within months. Each ruler mints new coins, sometimes in enormous quantities, declaring stability, victory, or divine favour. But the metal contradicts the message. People see through the propaganda when the silver is nearly gone, and still the empire fights to endure. Amid the chaos, a few strong leaders, like Aurelian, attempt brief reforms, temporarily restoring confidence. He reclaims lost territories, restructures the mints, and punishes counterfeiters. But even his efforts cannot fully heal a century of economic wounds. You drift now into a vast hall where officials meet in exhaustion. Reports pile before them of inflation, uprisings, food shortages, invasions. The empire feels stretched thin, its once solid foundations creaking under the weight of ceaseless demands. They know something must change. They know the currency cannot continue on its downward path. But they also know immediate crises leave little room for long-term repair. Outside the hall, Rome's streets remain crowded with life. Children play games with the increasingly lightweight coins. Merchants still shout their offers. The baths are still filled with conversation and steam. Life goes on, but the air carries an unease that was not there in earlier centuries. The clatter of coinage has changed. It sounds hollower now, like a bell struck with too soft a hand. And beneath that hollow sound, you sense the empire turning toward a new era, one that demands sweeping reforms, stronger leadership, and a currency capable of restoring faith. The crisis has reached its height. Soon an emperor will rise who dares to reset the system entirely. But for now, the instability hums through Rome like a fever, a trembling reminder that even the mightiest empire can falter when the trust behind its currency begins to crumble. The fevered instability of the 3rd century shivers against your awareness, and then, slowly, you feel a shift. The trembling edges of the Roman world steady, not into peace, but into the focused resolve of a leader determined to rebuild what chaos has nearly destroyed. When the haze clears, you stand in the presence of Diocletian, a man rising from soldierly origins to seize control of a fractured empire and attempt something monumental, to repair Rome's collapsing economy, to redefine its currency, and to restore confidence in a system strained to its breaking point. The air feels heavy with purpose. You drift into a council chamber where Diocletian meets with his advisors, generals, financiers, and administrators. They gather around a massive table littered with charts showing the debased coinage, inflation curves etched in desperate lines, and reports from provinces where barter has taken root again. Diocletian runs a steady hand along the edge of a wax tablet. His face is calm, disciplined, carved with the expression of a man who knows change must be radical. The empire has become too large, too complex, too unstable for old solutions. He begins by acknowledging the harsh truth. The denarius is dead, hollowed out by decades of debasement until it no longer resembles silver at all. The Antoninianus has fared no better, its once shining promise now a dull memory. Rome has lost its monetary anchor, and without an anchor, every transaction floats untethered. Something new must rise in place of the old. You drift into a vast mint complex where Diocletian's first major reforms take shape. Workers cast bronze coins with refined consistency, their coppery warmth a deliberate shift away from the deceptive silver-washed issues of earlier decades. New denominations appear, nummi, follies, and other bronze pieces intended to stabilize everyday transactions. These are heavier, more substantial than the coins of the crisis era, as if Rome is trying to restore physical confidence through weight and solidity. But bronze alone cannot heal the empire. Diocletian orders the creation of a silver coin, the argentius, struck with high purity and crisp imagery. Its bright gleam is meant to remind the people of what Rome once upheld. And then comes gold, the aureus, reintroduced at a fixed weight to become the bedrock of high-value transactions. In this trimetal system, gold, silver, bronze, Diocletian hopes to resurrect order. You drift from mint to market, watching the reforms unfold. Merchants examine the new coins with cautious optimism. The argentius rings with a purity unheard of in decades. A pottery seller tests it with her thumb and nods approvingly. "Real silver," she murmurs, "at last." But there is an undercurrent of hesitation. Rome has promised stability before, only to let it slip away. Trust is a delicate thing, and Diocletian knows this better than anyone. To reinforce his monetary overhaul, he introduces sweeping administrative reforms. You drift across the empire watching governors replaced, tax systems restructured, provincial borders redrawn. The Tetrarchy, his system of shared imperial rule, spreads political power across 4 leaders, ensuring no single crisis can overwhelm the state. The empire, once unwieldy and centralized, now functions like a well-organized machine. Yet no reform sparks as much debate as Diocletian's edict on maximum prices. You feel the tension thicken as you glide into a crowded forum, where officials nail the edict onto a stone wall. A hush falls over the gathered citizens as they read. Fixed prices for thousands of goods: grain, wine, cloth, tools, livestock, transportation, intended to combat runaway inflation. Wages are capped, profits regulated, violators threatened with severe penalties. At first, people breathe with relief. Prices have risen unbearably in recent decades. Bread has become unpredictable. Oil costs fluctuate wildly. The edict seems like a lifeline, a firm reassertion of state authority. But as the crowd disperses, merchants exchange worried glances. One spice seller whispers, "What if I cannot afford to sell at these prices? The spices cost more to import than I am allowed to charge." A farmer shakes his head. The law does not change the cost of raising livestock. Beneath the hopeful murmurs lies an unresolved tension. The edict tries to command the economy rather than heal it. You drift across towns and provinces, watching reactions unfold. In some regions, the edict temporarily stabilizes prices. In others, markets freeze entirely. Merchants hide goods rather than sell at mandated rates. Black markets bloom in alleyways and hidden courtyards. Soldiers patrol markets, attempting to enforce compliance, but enforcement only goes so far. Within months, the edict begins to crack under the weight of human behavior and economic complexity. Historians still argue whether the policy was doomed from the start or whether it was a noble attempt distorted by local corruption and uneven enforcement. Some admire Diocletian's determination to tame inflation. Others see the edict as a desperate gesture. But as you drift through these scenes, you sense how profoundly the empire yearned for stability, even if it meant accepting difficult experiments. The story moves forward again, carrying you into Diocletian's long-term vision. Beyond currency reforms, he stabilizes the tax system by standardizing assessments and tying taxes to land and labor. He increases administrative granularity so local officials can respond better to regional needs. In doing so, he builds the scaffolding of an empire that can endure future storms, even if his monetary policies prove only partially successful. Then comes a surprising shift. Diocletian abdicates. For the first time in Rome's long history, an emperor voluntarily steps down. You watch him retreat to his palace at Split. Gardens, sea breezes, open courtyards, and there he tends vegetables with the ease of a man who has earned rest. His reforms have not solved every problem, but they have stopped the free fall. Rome no longer reels from crisis to crisis. The currency system still strains, but it breathes, steadies, evolves. In the years immediately following Diocletian, some reforms fracture, others endure. The aureus remains important but fluctuates. The argentius struggles to stay relevant. Bronze coinage sees new varieties. The empire continues searching for equilibrium. But through it all, the groundwork Diocletian laid will guide future emperors, especially the one who soon rises with a vision powerful enough to reshape not only Rome's currency, but its spiritual identity. You drift now into the twilight of Diocletian's reforms, sensing the empire turning toward Constantine. The metallic scent of gold intensifies at the edge of your perception, like a beacon calling from the next chapter. For the moment, though, you linger in this era of bold, imperfect reconstruction, in the echo of hammer strikes on fresh silver, in the earnest proclamations of the edict, in the cautious hope of merchants, and in the quiet conviction of an emperor who believed Rome could be stabilized through discipline, structure, and the steadying weight of honest coinage. The reforms may not have fully restored confidence, but they prepared Rome for a monetary rebirth whose brilliance will soon surpass anything the empire has known since its golden age. The silver breath of Diocletian's reforms lingers behind you like a fading echo, and now a warmer, steadier light draws you onward. Golden, concentrated, purposeful. It gleams not with the fragile shimmer of a temporary solution, but with the calm, unwavering glow of something enduring. As your awareness settles into the early 4th century, the figure who commands this radiance approaches with the quiet certainty of a man who understands that power, faith, and currency must all speak the same language. Constantine rises before you, and with him comes the most resilient coin the Roman world will ever know, the solidus. You drift into a hall where Constantine stands among advisors, surveying reports of the empire's needs with the contemplative stillness of someone planning a future others cannot yet imagine. His gaze rests on tablets recording the uneven performance of Diocletian's earlier coins. The gold aureus remains noble but inconsistent in weight across regions. The silver argentius circulates unevenly. Bronze denominations swirl in a chaotic variety that confuses transactions. Constantine senses that Rome needs more than reform. It needs a foundation, a stable core, around which the entire monetary system can orbit. The room brightens as he gestures to his finance ministers. "We must create a coin," he says, "that does not falter." The words fall into the air like a promise. Something in the tone suggests he is not merely imagining currency, he is imagining legacy. You drift into a vast imperial mint, where workers prefer to strike the first solidi. Crucibles glow as gold melts into shimmering pools. Unlike earlier coins, whose weights sometimes shifted according to political pressures, the solidus is designed to be exact. 4.5 grams of nearly pure gold, no matter the region, no matter the mint, no matter the emperor. It will be struck with such consistency that centuries later, even long after Rome falls, its standard will still anchor economies across Europe and the Mediterranean. Artisans pour the molten gold, shaping blanks with meticulous care. The air glows amber as the first hammer strikes fall. Constantine's portrait emerges, serene, commanding, haloed by the faint curvature of authority. On the reverse side, symbols of military victory or divine sanction shimmer into being. Winged victory, a crowned cross, or Christogram Nepal, depending on the year and political messaging. These images speak softly but clearly. The emperor's power is protected by heaven, and the coin that bears his face participates in this protection. Currency and spirituality intertwine for the first time in Roman monetary history. You drift now into Constantinople, the new capital rising like a proclamation. Streets widen, markets flourish, ships crowd the harbours, unloading grain, silk, wine, spices, marble and glass. Traders from every corner of the Mediterranean gather in its forums, their conversations weaving languages into living tapestry. Every transaction, from a loaf of bread to a cartload of gems, bears the influence of the solidus, even when bronze and silver change hands more commonly. It is the solidus that underpins prices. It is the solidus that merchants trust. It is the solidus that bridges regions newly reconnected through Constantine's consolidation of power. A merchant from Antioch receives a payment of several bright solidi. He turns them over delicately, admiring the clarity of the imagery and the uniform weight. Coins like these travel smoothly across seas and deserts, neither doubted nor questioned. They represent not the unstable promises of the 3rd century, but the disciplined renewal of a world stabilized under a new political structure, and soon a new religious identity. Indeed, you feel another current moving through the empire, one that Constantine harnesses carefully: Christianity. The Edict of Milan grants tolerance, and soon the empire's spiritual life shifts around this new centre. You drift into churches rising beside older temples, their walls echoing with hymns instead of incantations. Constantine does not strike overtly Christian imagery on coins immediately. Politics and caution guide him, but the subtle signs accumulate. Eventually, Christograms appear on some issues, quiet symbols of a world turning. The solidus becomes part of this transition. It is both economic and symbolic. Accepting a solidus means accepting the emperor's authority, but also accepting his world, a world where divine favour legitimizes political stability. You drift into a small village where a baker receives a tiny bronze coin as payment for bread. She smiles as she examines it, noting a faint Christian symbol on its reverse. It is only bronze, but it participates in the system anchored by gold in the new balance shaped by Constantine's policies. You glide toward the empire's military frontiers, where soldiers' wages again reflect this renewed stability. Gone are the days of debased Antoniniani and hollow promises. Troops receive payments linked to the soldus's value, restoring their confidence. Along the Danube, a young soldier laughs with relief as he pockets a stipend that can actually buy supplies at predictable prices. He has heard stories from his father of the crisis of the 3rd century, a coin's worth less by the week. But he lives in a different moment, one where gold holds its shape in both metal and meaning. Merchants too feel the shift. In Alexandria, traders dealing in spices and textiles use solidi for large shipments, forming commercial networks of unprecedented scale. A deal might involve dozens of gold coins, each one gleaming like a promise of fairness. Even traders far outside the empire admire the solidus. In Persia, in kingdoms along the Red Sea, and eventually even among Germanic tribes, the coin becomes so revered that some rulers issue imitations not out of disrespect but out of deep admiration. You drift now into a treasury office in Constantinople. Bronze coins are counted by the thousands. Silver still circulates in limited form. But the solidus, stored in gleaming rows, anchors everything. A financial official runs his finger along a line of gold coins, checking the year marks, feeling the crisp ridges. The consistency is astonishing. This coin does not lie. It does not fade. It is the rare promise Rome manages to keep in its later centuries. The official smiles faintly. This, he says to a young scribe, will outlive us. You drift again, this time toward the edges of future centuries, watching how Constantine's gold quietly threads its way into worlds he never saw. The coin will survive the fall of the Western Empire, It will remain the backbone of Byzantine finance. It will cross into medieval Europe, influence Islamic dinar standards, and shape commerce for nearly 1,000 years. Few human creations endure so long. Fewer still do so by simply being what they claim to be. Honest, consistent, pure. But now your attention settles once more in Constantine's era, where the empire still stands united. Roads pulse with renewed traffic. Markets hum with confidence. Military frontiers stabilize beneath the weight of gold that does not change. The solidus becomes the quiet hero of this age, a coin without theatrics, without excess, without the brittle brightness of old silver promises. Its beauty lies not in romantic shine, but in reliability. As evening settles across Constantinople, you drift above the palace where Constantine stands upon a balcony overlooking the sea. His robes ripple in the soft breeze. Below him, lights flicker along the harbour, where merchants count coins, sailors unload goods, and distant ships arrive under scattered stars. He watches, silent, contemplative. Perhaps he senses that what he has built will endure. Perhaps he knows that the empire will change again after him. But the currency he created, the solidus, glows in the palm of the empire like a steady flame that neither wind nor time can easily extinguish. And as you drift forward toward the next layer of the story, the golden radiance softens, opening into the lives of ordinary Romans whose days, hopes, and struggles unfold within this newly stabilized world. The golden steadiness of the solidus dims to a gentle human warmth as you drift forward, not into palaces or mints or battlefields, but into the everyday lives of Romans who move through this new, stabilized world created by emperors and their currency. The empire may be vast and its political changes dramatic, but most people measure time not by who rules or how many grams of gold sit in the treasury, but by how they earn their bread, how they pay their taxes, how they save for their children, and how they make sense of a changing economy that flows quietly beneath the rhythm of daily life. Your awareness settles just outside the walls of a bustling Roman town, where dawn glows softly over tiled rooftops. The streets fill gradually, artisans unlocking their shops, bakers dusting flour across wooden counters, farmers guiding carts of produce toward the marketplace. Coins jingle in pouches and purses, each one carrying the empire's story, but in these streets, coins are less symbols of imperial authority and more tools of survival. You first drift toward a bakery where the air is warm with the scent of fresh loaves. The baker, his arms dusted with flour, greets customers as he slices bread and wraps it in linen. A woman steps forward, placing a few bronze coins into his hand. He inspects them quickly, checking weight, listening to their ring, ensuring no counterfeiters have shaved their edges. Though the solidus anchors the economy, most people use bronze daily. These coins may not gleam like gold, but they are the pulse of ordinary exchange. The baker counts out change with practiced ease. "Prices have held steady this season," he says kindly, sensing the woman's worry. Many households still feel the echoes of earlier inflation, and some fear it could return. She nods with relief, clutching the bread as though it carries reassurance as well as nourishment. You drift onwards to the workshop of a blacksmith, whose hammer strikes sing out into the morning air. Sparks shower against stone as he shapes iron tools, ploughshares, chisels, hinges, nails. A local farmer arrives to collect a repaired wagon wheel, reaching into his belt for the silver coins he's saved for the service. The blacksmith accepts them carefully, for silver is less common in everyday life now. The farmer explains how he earned these coins selling surplus olives at market, a rare success in a season where heavy rains threaten the harvest. They speak briefly of taxes. They are always due, always heavy, and always tied to land and labour. The farmer sighs. Even in stable times, taxes shape a Roman's life more than coinage reform ever could. You drift next into a modest domus where a young mother teaches her children simple arithmetic using bronze coins. She lines them up in Pauline rows. 10 small coins equal one larger piece, and the children laugh as they count, reshuffle, and stack them. Though they are too young to grasp the empire's complexity, they understand the importance of money. Their mother tells them gently, "Coins are promises. We must use them wisely." Her words echo both practical wisdom and a truth Rome has learned through centuries of hardship. The value of money rests not only on metal, but on trust. As the morning brightens, you slip into the office of a local tax collector. His desk is cluttered with tablets recording what each family owes: land taxes, trade levies, transport fees, occasional surcharges for road repairs or military needs. People enter nervously, coins clutched in hand or tied in small cloth bundles. Some pay in gold or silver if they are wealthy. Most pay in bronze, counted painstakingly. The collector weighs the heavier payments with scrupulous attention. Rome's bureaucratic system demands accuracy, and mistakes can lead to fines or worse. A weary farmer arrives with a small bag of mixed coins. As he empties them onto the table, the collector raises an eyebrow at the older, worn pieces, remnants of debased eras long past. Though still accepted, they require careful valuation. The farmer sighs and explains that he found these coins buried in a clay pot on his land, likely hidden by someone during earlier chaos. Though the coins help him meet his tax quota today, he knows that next year he must rely again on the fickle fortunes of the harvest. Your awareness drifts back to the marketplace where the day hums with energy. A group of merchants from different regions gather under a striped canopy, comparing goods and exchanging coins in several metals. A man from Africa sells ivory figurines and accepts a solidus for a large transaction. A merchant from Syria sells dyes and prefers silver for its stable value. A local seller of figs takes bronze, the currency of everyday sustenance. Different metals, different values, different stories, all circulating through a single shared marketplace. You move toward a stall selling pottery, where a craftsman displays bowls and amphorae decorated with swirling designs. A young couple examines a large storage jar, hoping to buy it for their new household. The craftsman quotes a price in bronze, and the couple negotiates gently. They settle on a fair amount, exchanging coins with smiles. This is a quiet moment of prosperity, ordinary yet precious. Economic stability means families can plan, build, hope, but not all in Rome live with such ease. You drift toward the outskirts of the town where labourers rest after hours spent hauling stone for a new aqueduct. Their pay is modest, handfuls of bronze sestertii, but enough to buy meals and basic necessities. Still, some workers worry that future emperors may raise taxes or reduce wages. Stability feels real, but they know history too well to trust it blindly. Further along, you find a retired soldier living in a simple cottage with his grown daughter and her family. He sorts through a small chest of coins, mostly bronze, and a few cherished silver pieces from earlier service. The solidus he once received as a re-enlistment bonus glints warmly among them. He keeps it wrapped in cloth, a reminder of the value of discipline and the promise of imperial order. "This little coin fed us through a harsh winter," he tells his grandchildren as they gather around him. "Gold doesn't mould or spoil. It remembers." You drift across the empire now, seeing how currency shapes countless lives. In Egypt, workers unload grain destined for imperial distribution. Payments are calculated carefully, often in bronze but anchored to the solidus system. A scribe marks the tallies on a papyrus sheet, ensuring accuracy across thousands of sacks. In Syria, merchants negotiate using a mix of Roman coinage and local silver issues, cross-referencing values with practiced ease. They depend on Rome's stability to keep long-distance trade profitable. In North Africa, wealthy landowners store gold coin in ceramic jars hidden beneath floors or behind walls. They trust the empire, but they trust gold more. In Gaul, farmers trade directly with soldiers stationed nearby, accepting bronze coins but sometimes preferring payment in grain or tools, old habits blending with new realities. And in Constantinople, the capital hums with gold. Aristocrats, bankers, and high-ranking officials use solidi frequently, anchoring the city's prosperity in a currency that seems immune to the turbulence of time. You drift past one of these elites counting a line of solidi with serene confidence, each coin identical, each one a perfectly measured promise. As evening settles, you wander into a small tavern where locals relax after a day's work. Coins clatter across tables during games of chance, bronze mostly, with the occasional flash of silver. A musician plays a lute, and laughter fills the room. One man raises a cup of wine and remarks that life feels predictable again, that he can save money for his son's education, that he no longer worries the way his father once did. Another nods but adds, "Prosperity comes and goes. My grandfather saw the bad years. We must be ready." His voice is not fearful, merely cautious, a reminder that Romans carry the memory of instability like a faint scar. And yet, in this moment, the empire's currency hums smoothly through its veins. Prices are stable, trade is vibrant, soldiers are paid, families save, merchants thrive. Money is trusted, not perfectly, not universally, but deeply enough for daily life to flow with rare contentment. You drift upward as night settles fully across the empire. The lights of cities and towns flicker like scattered constellations. Somewhere along the Rhine, a soldier hands a bronze coin to a tavern keeper. Somewhere in Alexandria, gold changes hands in a transaction for glassware. Somewhere in Gaul, a family counts bronze coins by candlelight, dreaming of a better harvest. In every scene, coins move hand to hand, carrying the quiet heartbeat of a civilization that, for now, holds together. But as you drift toward the horizon, a subtle dimming touches the edges of your awareness. The world does not collapse abruptly. It unravels slowly, unevenly. The currency that today feels so dependable will soon encounter the pressures of shrinking frontiers, internal divisions, and the fading authority of the Western Empire. The solidus will endure, but the empire around it will begin its long, slow fade. Night settles across the empire like a heavy velvet cloth, and as you drift forward, the gentle glow of everyday Roman life begins to thin at the edges. The world grows quieter, not with the dramatic crash of collapse, but with the slow, almost imperceptible fading of old certainties. You feel the weight of centuries behind you, the confident clang of Aiaeus' grave, the bright pulse of the denarius, the golden steadiness of the solidus. Yet now something in the air loosens. Roads that once thrummed with traffic feel emptier. Markets thin, mints grow quieter. The Western Roman Empire, stretched and stressed, enters its long twilight. You find yourself wandering a once bustling forum in northern Italy. The stones beneath your feet remain strong, but weeds push up through the cracks. Vendors still gather, though fewer than before. Their voices are soft, their goods fewer. Their customers cautious. A cloth merchant arranges bolts of rough wool, their colours muted compared to earlier centuries. His purse contains a mix of coins, sturdy bronze from Constantine's era, newer issues of uneven quality, and a few foreign coins from local tribes beyond the frontier. Each piece tells a story of fragmentation. When a customer approaches, a farmer with grime still clinging to his hands, the merchant accepts several small bronze coins. He examines them one by one, his brows pulling together. The coins are legitimate, but their imagery is faint, worn by years of circulation. "They'll do," he says quietly, but neither man smiles. Inflation is creeping again. The once bright confidence of Rome's monetary system has dimmed into uncertainty. As you stroll through the town, you notice the local mint's tall facade looming near the edge of the forum. The sound of coin production, once steady as a heartbeat, now comes in infrequent bursts. Inside, only a handful of workers remain. A foreman removes a fresh bronze issue from the mould, sighing as he studies its quality. Resources are thin, control is disrupted. He explains to a tired apprentice, "We do what we can. The Empire expects these coins," but his sentence dissolves into silence. He doesn't need to finish. The boy understands. The Empire is no longer the Empire it once was. You drift outward to a frontier fort along the Rhine, where Roman soldiers stand watch beneath a cold autumn wind. Their pay, once delivered with precision and backed by steady value, now arrives irregularly. Some receive small bronze coins of dubious purity. Others are given supplies instead of coinage: grain, cloth, tools. A centurion distributes payments with a grim expression. He assures his men that Rome is still strong, but they can hear the strain in his voice. Many soldiers have begun trading directly with local tribes, blending Roman and non-Roman economies in makeshift markets. Coins pass between cultures not with pride, but with necessity. In one such market, a Germanic trader examines a coin bearing the fading portrait of a Western emperor. "This man," he asks in halting Latin, "still rules?" A Roman soldier shrugs. "Perhaps," the trader chuckles, not mockingly, but with the bewilderment of someone who remembers when Rome's authority was unquestioned. Now the borders blur. The empire's coinage, once a beacon of stability, moves in uncertain arcs. You travel next to Gaul, where towns that once thrived under the Pax Romana struggle to maintain prosperity. In a dim workshop, a local artisan melts down old bronze Roman coins to make brooches and household ornaments. He explains to his daughter that while coinage was once sacred, untouchable, things have changed. "We use what we have," he says, shaping a gleaming bronze pin. "Rome is far now." Though the empire's political centre remains in Ravenna or Rome, its spiritual and economic centre has drifted eastward toward Constantinople. In the west, distance becomes its own kind of erosion. You drift further into the halls of Western administrators who cling desperately to their authority. Tax collectors travel under armed guard. Governors send reports pleading for funds, supplies, reinforcements. The responses they receive, if they receive any, are thin, delayed, or worse, empty promises. You watch an official break the wax seal on a letter from the emperor, only to lower it with a defeated sigh. The treasury cannot provide what is needed. Rome's coffers in the west are simply too empty. Even the solidus, that steadfast pillar of the east, begins to appear less frequently in western hands. Some officials hoard them, knowing their value will hold no matter what happens. Others use them sparingly, paying foreign mercenaries whose loyalty must be purchased with the most reliable coin available. In a candle-lit chamber, you observe a Western general negotiating with a group of foederati leaders. He places a small tray of solidi before them. Their eyes widen, they know gold's worth better than words. The general explains that more payments will follow, but you feel his dread. What if more cannot be found? From Italy to Hispania to Britannia, the mints falter. Each region improvises its own solutions. Some issue smaller bronze coins with minimal imagery. Others cease minting entirely. Local economies revert partially to barter, partially to hybrid systems mixing Roman and tribal currencies. The empire no longer issues one voice through its money. Instead, its currency becomes a chorus of competing dialects. And still, life continues. You drift into a small villa in southern Gaul where a mother counts her savings, bronze coins, a few clipped silver pieces, and one cherished solidus inherited from her father. She stores the solidus carefully in a clay jar, whispering, "This one will keep us safe." She trusts it more than the fading power of emperors. To her, the solidus is not just money, it is memory, legacy, protection. You drift onward through rural fields where farmers harvest grain in silence. In earlier centuries, they would have sent a portion of their crop as tax tribute and sold the rest for bright, trustworthy silver. Now much of the grain goes directly to local lords or to soldiers passing through. Coins exchange hands less often. Goods move directly from producer to consumer. The Roman state, once the economic backbone of the countryside, becomes a distant idea. In towns ravaged by invasions, residents search through rubble for anything of value. Among broken pottery and shattered tiles, a child finds a bronze Roman coin. She runs to her grandmother, holding it high like treasure. The elderly woman turns it over gently, smiling at the faint outline of Roma on the reverse. "When I was your age," she says softly, "these meant everything." The girl nods, unable to imagine such a world, yet cherishing the small coin as a token of continuity. You drift next across the Alps into northern Italy, where refugees flee approaching armies. Among them, a scribe carries a leather pouch filled with records, keys, and a few gold solidi. He clutches the pouch tightly as he walks. He knows the empire may crumble around him, but gold remains gold. He murmurs to himself, "What Rome could not defend, perhaps this will save." Around him, caravans of displaced families move wearily, their possessions reduced to whatever they can carry on their backs, including, in many cases, a handful of coins that once symbolized unity, but now serve only as reminders of a fading world. By the time you drift back toward Rome itself, the fading is unmistakable. Aqueducts run dry in some regions, public baths close, the Colosseum stands silent more often than roaring, statues crumble, unrepaired. And yet, among the people an odd resilience persists. They adapt, they negotiate, they remember. The collapse is slow enough that they can shape their lives to meet it, even as their currency, once the empire's heartbeat, grows faint. The image of the last Western emperors flickers on coins with diminishing clarity. Their portraits are crude compared to earlier artistry, their names obscure, their authority contested. Local warlords mint coins in their own likenesses or in imitation of imperial currency, blurring the line between Rome and not Rome. The empire becomes a tapestry unravelling thread by thread. But through it all, the solidus endures. In Constantinople, mints continue striking gold coins of astonishing purity. These coins will eventually be copied by medieval kingdoms, traded by Arab merchants, and accepted from Spain to India long after the Western Empire dissolves into dust. Even as the Western mints flicker out one by one, the solidus glows steadily in the east, like a flame sheltered from wind. Night deepens along the Italian hills as you drift into the final quiet moments of Western Roman coinage. A last batch of bronze coins cools in a nearly deserted mint. No audience, no fanfare, no certainty that anyone will rely on these pieces for long. The workers extinguish the forge, unaware that they are likely shutting it for the final time. The city sleeps, the empire fades, and through this stillness you sense something tender. Even as Rome's institutions fall away, the memory of its currency, its trust, its symbols, its ambition remains alive in the hands of the people who once depended on it. In dusty purses, in buried hoards, in keepsakes, in stories whispered to children. The mints go dark, but the echoes endure. The world around you feels hushed now, as if the entire landscape of history inhales and holds its breath. The Western Empire has dimmed into quiet embers, its institutions fading into memory, but the story of its currency, of bronze and silver and gold, does not end with the fall of Rome. Instead, it lingers, carried forward through generations like a melody that cannot be forgotten. You drift into this afterworld of Rome, where old coins lie buried in fields, tucked in chests, hidden in walls, and cupped in the palms of people living in a world that no longer calls itself Roman, yet still echoes with Roman habits of value, measurement and trust. Your awareness settles in a small stone village somewhere in the foothills of early medieval Italy. The empire is gone, its laws and offices dissolved, but the villagers speak Latin fractured with new dialects, and Roman coins remain precious objects. In one home, a farmer keeps a tiny hoard of bronze and silver pieces passed down from his grandfather, coins bearing the worn faces of emperors he cannot name. He lines them on a table, studying them in the dim light. Though they no longer function as official currency, their weight and artistry remind him of a time when the world was organized under one structure, one standard. He keeps them not for spending, but for remembering. Elsewhere in the village, a merchant conducts a trade using Byzantine solidi, the same gold coin introduced under Constantine centuries earlier. The villagers accept the coin with reverence, calling it Byzant, a name that will echo through medieval Europe. The solidus has outlived the Roman West and now circulates across kingdoms, monasteries, and trade routes stretching from the North Sea to the Near East. Its stability is legendary. A local priest describes it as the coin that never lies, and in a world where institutions falter and kingdoms rise and fall in rapid succession, such honesty in metal becomes almost sacred. You drift from Italy to Gaul, where the Merovingian kings mint their own coins, but base their standards on Roman precedents. Gold tremises, stamped with new rulers' names, still follow weights that Roman solidi once standardized. Moneyers copy Roman numerals, Roman imagery, even Roman abbreviations, sometimes imperfectly, sometimes inventively, but always with a sense that Roman forms carry authority. In a small workshop, a Frankish moneyer examines an old Roman bronze coin for reference before striking a new issue. Though he serves a king, he borrows from an empire whose shadow still guides his hand. In distant Britain, far from the empire's collapsed borders, Roman coins continue to circulate long after legions depart. Archaeologists centuries later will find Roman silver pieces buried beside Anglo-Saxon ones, suggesting that Roman currency retained symbolic and practical value in a land reinventing itself. You drift through a wooden hall where a chieftain accepts tribute from local farmers, furs, livestock, and occasionally Roman coins polished by handling. The chieftain smiles as he turns a denarius between his fingers. "Our fathers used these," he murmurs. "We keep their memory." Trade routes across the Mediterranean remain alive, though fragmented. In bustling bazaars of the Near East, Byzantine gold passes from merchant to merchant, while worn Roman bronzes sometimes appear as relics or curiosities. A Syrian trader examines a small bronze coin depicting an emperor whose name he cannot decipher. "Old Roman," he says with a shrug. "Still worth something for the bronze?" Yet when he handles the solidus, his expression brightens. He bites it gently, nods in approval, and accepts it without hesitation. The empire that once ruled his land is gone, but its gold still commands trust. You drift northeast into Slavic regions where hoards of Roman silver remain buried in fields, treasures hidden during chaotic migrations. Silver denarii, centuries old, emerge as talismans against misfortune, gifts at weddings, tokens placed with the dead. In these lands, Roman coins outlive Roman rule by becoming part of superstition, storytelling, and memory. Children handle them with awe, tracing faint portraits with curious fingers, asking their elders who these men were. The elders shake their heads. Kings from the old world, they say. Their power has faded, but their metal remains. In monasteries across Europe, monks compile manuscripts that attempt to preserve Roman knowledge. They sketch illustrations of Roman coins in vellum margins, noting their inscriptions. One monk in Tours counts a solidus received as a donation and records its weight meticulously, 4.5 grams, unchanged since Constantine. The Romans measured with care, he writes. We should learn from them. Thus the solidus becomes not just currency, but a teacher. a standard of precision in an age struggling to maintain order. As centuries pass, new empires rise. The Carolingians introduce their own coinage reforms, but still rely on Roman measures. Charlemagne himself models elements of his monetary system on Roman principles, establishing the denier, whose name preserves the memory of the ancient denarius. A merchant in Aachen might not know the full history, but when he counts deniers, he is unwittingly continuing Rome's story. Far to the south, the rise of the Islamic Caliphate brings new gold dinars into circulation. Yet these dinars too owe part of their weight standard to the Roman solidus. Traders from Damascus to Baghdad accept Byzantine gold with confidence, often melting it to create their own coins. The idea of stable gold currency, transnational, dependable, respected, comes directly from Rome's long tradition. You drift into a medieval port city where Venetian merchants prepare for voyages across the Mediterranean. They count Byzantine solidi, now called bezants, among their most treasured assets. These coins will finance expeditions, pay for cargo, and secure safe passage in foreign lands. The Venetian ducat, one of Europe's most influential medieval coins, will eventually be modelled on the solidus, carrying its reliability forward into yet another age. Thus, even as the Roman Empire becomes a distant memory in Western Europe, the monetary ideas it forged continue shaping global commerce. Yet the legacy of Roman currency is not just economic, it is emotional, symbolic, cultural. You drift into a quiet home in medieval Spain where a family keeps an ancient Roman coin in a small wooden box. They believe it brings luck. When a child falls ill, they press the coin into his palm. When the eldest daughter marries, they give her the coin as a blessing. When a new house is built, they bury the coin under the foundation to strengthen the home. These practices have no imperial decree behind them, only the sense that Roman metal carries something enduring. Even centuries later, during the Renaissance, scholars rediscover Roman coins with fascination. Humanists pore over their inscriptions, marvel at their artistry, and decode their symbols to understand history. Coins become windows into the ancient world, tiny, enduring messengers of emperors long gone. And now, as you drift gently back from these centuries, you sense that the story of Rome's money never truly ends. It flows through museums where children press their faces to glass, studying the denarius of Caesar or the aureus of Augustus. It echoes in modern words like money, mint, pecuniary, all descended from Roman concepts. It lingers in the idea that a currency must be trusted, must be stable, must be backed by something more than metal. Rome taught the world these lessons through trial, triumph, failure, and reinvention. The rise of bronze, the shine of silver, the radiance of gold. Each phase shaped not only an empire, but the very idea of money as civilization uses it today. And so you drift towards stillness, carrying the final echoes of this long journey into a softening landscape where the past hums gently, ready to settle you into rest. The long arc of Rome's story settles now into a gentle hush, as though the centuries themselves exhale and grow still. You feel the weight of metal fade from your hands, the clang of markets soften, the roar of legions dissolve into a distant whisper. What remains is only a warm, drifting calm, a sense of time stretching wide and quiet around you. The coins that once gleamed with an empire now rest like drowsy stars, scattered across memory, each one glowing softly as it drifts farther into the night. Let your breath lengthen as you picture them, bronze settling into cool earth, silver resting in forgotten jars, gold shimmering like tiny suns in the dark. All the noise that once surrounded them is gone now. No mints, no marching boots, no clamouring markets, only stillness, only the slow, steady rhythm of history falling asleep. If you listen closely, you may still hear the faintest echo, a soft ring of a denarius, the distant sigh of wind over an old Roman road, the heartbeat of a story that has finally found its quiet end. Let that echo fade gently like ripples slipping across calm water until the world grows smooth again. The empire has gone to rest. Its coins have grown silent. Its light has dimmed into a peaceful glow that asks nothing of you now. You may drift with it, floating comfortably in the soft space between waking and dreaming, knowing the journey has finished and nothing more is required. Allow the last traces of Rome's long tale to settle like dust in warm lamplight, slow, soft, weightless. And as they settle, let your own thoughts quiet, your breath sink deeper, your eyelids grow heavier, and your mind drift into the gentle dark where stories become dreams and dreams become sleep.